You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. Thanks to Evans Mensah for holding the fort whilst I was away last week. And here is Samson's take. Contempt on strike. Contempt on strike. As you may be aware, judicial service staff are on strike. They have very important demands that they are making of their employer. But it doesn't appear their employer is listening to them at all. That is why their employer can afford to let them stay on the strike regardless of what is going on in the courts. Litigants are frustrated. The courts have been shut. And who is really listening to them? As you listen and read the statements that they put out in respect of their strike, they have given more than sufficient time for their issue to be dealt with. They were made to enjoy the COLA that was given to civil servants. And that COLA was eventually withdrawn. But people who are like them had another window where they enjoyed a raise in their pay by about 30% or so. And they remain where they are without a penny being added to them. And the point is that there is a process to review their pay all the time. This time, as we speak, this process ought to have started, perhaps concluded sometime by January. There's no information and there's no progress whatsoever. Those who are supposed to do this to get them their increase didn't do it. So they decided to begin the process by themselves. And that process has been stalled. They gave notice, they gave time, nobody bothered. Now they went to give indication of their intention to go on strike. And the National Labour Commission calls them for a meeting. In that meeting, the other stakeholders from the presidency and from the Ministry of Finance, as in more particularly the Labour Ministry and the Finance Ministry, and also representation from the Office of the Chief of Staff, were supposed to be here in that meeting. They didn't turn up. They failed to show up. They were alone in that meeting. And the Labour Commission decided to take upon itself finding defenses and justifications why those who were supposed to be at the table were not there. They disrespected them so much, or that they planned together with the commission to frustrate them. That's what they suspect. The commission, they say, attempted to justify the absence of those who were supposed to be there. And when they asked them for an adjournment so that they will be given opportunity to return at a later date, the commission was insisting on a longer time than they would admit. Guess what? The commission issued a ruling asking them not to do anything and wait until the period they had given them had been exhausted. The ruling was dated the previous day before the day of the meeting. So they asked themselves, did you plan this and put a ruling together even before we come to the meeting? The Labour Commission subsequently withdrew that ruling is sent to them. So there was no ruling that they were to abide by. Nonetheless, they still said, we will exercise some good faith, and sort of agreed in principle to the time that the Labour Commission had given. Now, 2 weeks had come to pass. They wanted only a week's adjournment. The Labour Commission insisted on 2 weeks. The 2 weeks was to end on the 24th of May. By then, too, not a single person had made any contact with them. That is how much the disrespect is. So they decided that they would strike, and no one should blame them for anything. They say what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If you took away the kola from them and public sector workers' incomes have been increased by 30%, then they also deserve to receive an addition to their salaries. Their salaries must be reviewed as required by law. I think in all good conscience, one can only, agree with them and hope that their concerns will be resolved. The courts have been brought to a halt. That is not a joke. At the same time, we are now back to the debate about contempt and how it is done. And this is what I'll say. For many years, we have come back to this debate. I remember how Kweku Bako, Asa Nkrumah, all of them continued to preach that there was a need to pass the Contempt of Court Act to guide the process. The politicians forget about it once they are out of the trouble, when it affects them. When it doesn't affect them, they don't think much about it. This is how our society has been structured. Now, in all good conscience, it is difficult to think that it is okay to still use the common law contempt powers to operate and punish everybody in the realm. Those from whom we got that common law contempt put it into law as a Contempt of Court Act in 1981. And we are still using what we inherited from them. The problem is that there must be rules to guide the process. It clearly doesn't sit well to be the complainant, to be the prosecutor, to be the judge in a matter involving yourself, particularly in contempt ex facie curiae, contempt that is committed outside of the face of the court. So we need to look at this. It's a serious matter. And when Atacha appeared before the court, he asked the question, is this a mercy chamber or a seat of justice? You appear summoned for contempt and you must, plead and ask for mercy, otherwise you get to jail. That approach is completely wrong. The rules, as we have known them, applying even in the common law contempt, ought to be what should hold. And that's by way of my take this morning. I will return shortly to welcome my guest as we go into the two biggest issues that we are canvassing for you this morning. What will be the nature of the review of the flagship programs? And how exactly is Freddie Blay's selling 50% of Ghana's stake in our oil fields? We'll be right back.
We demand the immediate removal of GNPC CEO Opoku Anyenini Dankwa and the board chairman Freddie W. Blay from their respective positions, as they have become a threat to Ghana's interest in the petroleum sector. 6. Additionally, we demand the immediate transfer of JOHL and all its assets from Cayman Island and other jurisdictions to GNPC. 7. We demand immediate disclosure of the Ake plan of development from the Petroleum Commission and the government. To conclude, we firmly believe that a country micromanaged by the IMF cannot be seen to engage in fiscal recklessness that undermines its recovery. Even though Ake has sold their interest in Ghana, they are scheming to stay on the Pecan development through surrogates and Ghanaian collaborators across segments of our society to amass ridiculous benefits from the Pecan field development. Ake Energy purchased an FPSO for $35 million. In their plan of development submitted to the government, Ake's previous owners intended to build Ghana $1.7 billion for the FPSO. We admit that the Energy Ministry has raised a preliminary objection to the cost of the FPSO, but there is no proposal on how much the ministry considers fair value for the FPSO.
These CSOs have asked for my head or for my resignation. It's a pressure. Everybody is calling me here and there. What have you done? Is it true that you have surreptitiously, as the word is, or scandalously decided to take GNPC shares and sell it to a foreign company, depriving this country of, I believe these are all allegations that I find them unfortunate. It's not the case. CG oil industry is very sensitive. And it's not my activity as an individual. It's not my conduct as an individual that will determine what is happening. I am complimented by, indeed, it's a chain of command. The presidency, the Ministry of Finance, our board of directors, there's an executive committee of GNPC, and the CEO is in charge of all these things. Before we take any decision, we go through meetings. Now, I can't on my own go and sell GNPC assets. As I said, it's a bit complicated. Now, I will have left, immediately you write such a thing about it, that people sense, even you in the media, you sense that there's a problem there, somehow. How can a GNPC chairman go and sell shares of the company to a foreign, deprive this country? Maybe he's doing so that you'll be benefit from it. We'll have some, they'll pay him on the side. It's scandalous. Is that not?
Was there any intention to sell?
Please, there's no intention to do so.
You're welcome back. So you have been listening to the CSOs. There were 29 CSOs that came together and to demand that Freddie Blay and the head of the GNPC be stopped from trying to sell Ghana cheap. And then you heard also Freddie Blay himself also responding and saying that this is not like some cigarette that you can sell. But clearly, there is a problem. And the Minister for the Sector's correspondence on the subject shows without a doubt that there is a problem. It is not the CSOs that are raising issues, but the issues began with Matthew Opoku Prempeh, having problems with the GNPC. My guest to deal with this first part of the discussion. John Ampontia Koma is MP Ejiso and Deputy Minister for Finance. Emmanuel Amakofibua is MP Elembele, Deputy Minority Leader and former Energy and Petroleum Minister. Theo Echampong is economist and political risk analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning.
Right. So let me begin with Emmanuel Amakofibua, because the NDC has also waded into this debate and appear to agree with the civil society, 29 of them, the issues they raise. So for starters, why should Ghanaians be listening to the CSOs and yourselves instead of Freddie Blay? And we'll share the various positions as have been, canvassed.
Good morning, Samson, and good morning to colleagues and your listeners.
Right.
Let me take you back. So Anadako decides to sell 100% of his shares in the Deepwater Tunnel and the West Cape 3 Points, and then they informed the Ministry of Energy. Ghana initially tries to preempt that transaction. The companies push back because of stability clauses, and they were right in doing so, because remember that at 919, which was passed in 2016, these companies have been in existence. So somehow, through negotiations, the minister carves out 7% in this agreement. And the companies had to do so because they also know that this transaction cannot go through without the consent of Ghana through the Minister of Energy. So the transaction, because they want to conclude it quickly, decide to set aside 7%, and they formed this Jubilee Oil Holding to basically hold that 7%. Initially, it was held by Anadako, and so the transaction is complete. The government of Ghana, through the Ministry of Finance, pays, as we've been told, 168 million, and the transaction is completed. The minister now writes to GMPC to basically make sure that 7% is transferred to Esploco, the strategic commercial arm of GMPC, which was established to basically push GMPC's agenda. So this is really how it went. And so the transaction is closed. The whole preemption issues and all and what Ghana said has been done. We get our 7%, the transaction is complete. And here comes Petro SA, now preempting the 7% that has been received and saying that they want. Now, listen, the joint operating agreement between the parties, even if that applies, requires that they basically do that. If you preempt and it's correct, based on your percentage, let's grant that the joint operating agreement stands. Petro SA has 4% in this agreement, and Jubilee Oil Holding has 7%. So what is the basis for the 50 that the chairman has agreed? In his letter, he says that he's agreeable to that 50%. Even if we agree that the joint operating agreements allowed that preemption to take place, the chairman is not able to explain how he arrived at the 50-50%. In any event, we have also not seen a board approval of this decision. Why is it that it is the GMPC board chairman who is writing the letter? Is he the executive chairman? Why is it not the CEO writing the letter? In any event, why is it writing the letter in direct disregard of the directive of the Minister of Energy? But what is really important for me and for us, a lot of us, has to do with GMPC's mandate. GMPC, number one goal is to increase Ghana's stake, make sure our stakes are increased, more oil for Ghana. The reason why GMPC was established That's the first objective. And one of the reasons why GMPC is being given money every year by Parliament is basically to prepare them to the day where Ghana will be in a position to get our national oil company to basically discover and produce oil independently so that all these foreign companies, Tullow, Cosmos, and others, will not be giving us basically crumbs. That's why we established Exploco as well. So having asked these questions and making the point that we have not been able to understand the legal and commercial basis for the chairman's letter, especially because it contravenes the directive of the minister, but more importantly, even the joint operating agreement does not ask, it doesn't require that Petroese gets 50%. So where did that 50% go? He is also not the CEO. What did the CEO also know? But more importantly, we are concerned because as we speak, Ghana is stuck with 3 producing oil fields. In fact, Jubilee is now produced over 50%. We stand the danger of basically depleting our reserve without adding anything on. The only opportunity we had, if you recall, had to do with the Ake field. Remember the history of that field. Hess was about to produce it. We were ready. We were going to produce it under the NDC government after we had prepared 3 producing fields. Then all of a sudden, Côte d'Ivoire lays claim to that field. So we go to arbitration. By the time we come back, Hess says he's pulling out. Ake comes in. And then the rest is history. Now, I won't try to go there because it takes us a whole day. But to say briefly that Ake basically has taken our country on a ride, come back and says that, listen, you need to give me all this sweetness before I'll produce. I'll go fast track. We reduce our stake. In fact, we take 24% of Exploco and give it to Ake. We reduce it by 43% to 18%. We take the power of the Petroleum Commission and give Ake all sorts of sweetness. Well, guess what? Ake doesn't produce that field. We are still stuck, and our reserves are depleting. They come back, with GMPC involved, they come back again, and I'm talking about this government. All of a sudden, Ake come and say that I'm selling my stake for 1.65 billion, and they have support of government. They come to Parliament, and this year, those who are being condemned today stood up. Thankfully, a lot of us in Parliament also stood up. And we said the South Deep Water Tunnel, there's no oil there. We can't buy that. Well, it turns out that less than a year and a half or 2 years, Ake is now saying, yes, I agree, there was nothing there. And we now know. But guess who was leading the effort? GMPC. So we as Ghanaians must be concerned that the National Oil Company that must be responsible for increasing our stake is being led by the board chairman, who is not the executive chairman, who doesn't have the minister's approval, who has been told by the minister that don't sell that 7%, in fact, transfer it to Exploco, who doesn't have a board approval, is basically negotiating to give 50% of a stake that will use the government of Ghana's money to pay for. If GMPC is paying, they're not even paying the government of Ghana. So the people of Ghana must be interested in this transaction, especially the questions I've raised.
All right.
And that is why we are worried.
Okay. Please hold on for me. Dr. Theo Champon, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Samson.
Great. I don't know whether you get fatigue over this issue. I remember 2019. I hosted you guys, Imani, Kofi Bento, Kofi Bento, Bright Simmons, yourself, and you had raised the critical issue of the potential of Ghana losing some $30 billion US, and you had said, quote, Aker Energy is walking all over this government at that time. Then in 2021, the issue pops up again about the need for GMPC to, as in government of Ghana, to commit as much as 1.6 billion in this process, and we were told of the promise of raking tax and royalties, approximately 7.51 billion in nominal terms, that there was going to be substantial foreign exchange inflows, estimated around 27 billion in nominal terms, and all sort of sweet things. Then we woke up to news of, ECA not actually being able to live up to the promise. And then now this. And you guys now have come together in a strong 29 civil society organizations. Please explain to the man on the street, what is this that you are fighting for?
Oh, it's very easy. We are fighting for Ghana and Ghana's interests, and that has always been the primary driver in all of this. It's interesting you quote some of the things that's happened in the past, because look, we have analyzed these issues ad nauseum, gone the nitty-gritty, done the due diligence, the back and forth. And back then, we highlighted serious issues about the ACA deal or the transaction, to the point that we even had to amend the country's petroleum laws just to suit or favor this one particular investor, off the back of various promises that were made about this particular investment. Then fast forward, you're right, 2021 thereabout, there's a proposed sale. Again, we do the analysis, and it is the conclusion is very clear that we should not be paying the 1.6 billion for those two assets because they were grossly overvalued. A number of us were hounded and even appeared on the front page of some newspapers, national newspapers, saying that we were quote unquote anti-Ghana.
That's right. I remember that.
Right? Yep. Fast forward, only a year and a half or so down the line, this same asset that was going to be bought for 1 point something billion of Ghana's own money, and actually we gave it to them, remember, an honorable Amaboy is very right. We gave it to them for free on a silver platter. This same asset now is being sold to another entity for $1 and some other sort of consideration. So you begin to actually wonder who is actually anti-Ghana in all of this. Is it civil society or the people whom we've actually given our mandate to negotiate for and on behalf of the good people of Ghana? So currently there are two issues on the table. The first issue relates or deals with the Jubilee Oil Holdings, which is a subsidiary of GNPC that bought the 7% combined interest in the 10 and then the Jubilee field. So Anadarko was one of the partners in the deal. Anadarko says that they are leaving Ghana. And then in the back and forth of that process, Ghana says that, okay, don't worry, we're going to buy those shares, right? Or some of those shares, and then transfer it to the National Oil Company or its subsidiary in that process. Now, something happens. When you read the petroleum laws of this country, and here I'll be very specific with you, Act 919, the Petroleum and Exploration Act, Section 18.1, which addresses or deals with issues of preemption. And let me quote for the purposes of educating our listeners. It says that where a contractor enters into an agreement to dispose of all or part of the interest of that contractor directly or indirectly under a petroleum agreement, the corporation, so this is GNPC, shall have a right or a preemption right to acquire that third interest on the same terms as agreed with the potential buyer. It is very clear. It is unambiguous. So I'm a bit at a loss now how suddenly the board chair of GNPC says that Petro SA, which is one of the partners in this deal, now enters into the equation, and there's meant to be a proposed 50% sale of the 7% that has been transferred to Jubilee Offshore Holdings, which was rightly acquired by the state using this preemption rights. And it is very important to state that the preemption rights of the state or Ghana as a whole supersedes any other rights of any other party in the petroleum agreement. It is very clear. And we've got precedent to this. You can go back to the when Cosmos Energy also wanted to sell out of its asset back in 2010. There was the whole back and forth around that. And Ghana at that point elected again to execute those preemption rights to say, look, if you want to sell to, it was then ExxonMobil at the time, we even opened a data room for them without all of the due process. But we used that right of the state to stop that deal and to force Cosmos to now stay and become a partner in all of this. So the process is very clear. There is no way that a right and a shares that have been acquired using national money or public resources through a company that has been set up as a subsidiary of the GMPC. And this right belongs to the people or the good people of Ghana. There is no way that a third party who is a commercial party in this transaction, in this case, Petro SA, can come in and say, let's take a portion of those rights. If that were the case, then we might as well just have Tallow Oil and all the other partners in the deal also saying that we also have a portion of those rights that should be accruing to us. So I think the board chair is very wrong on this, and we have to be very emphatic about that. And I support the call of civil society in relation to this, because we have studied this transaction or proposed transaction. We've looked at the past behavior of officials at the National Oil Company and others in relation to how we've been giving away these deals and concessions. And in this particular instance, it is very clear to us that the board chair was wrong. In fact, the minister was right by having written those letters and telling the board chair to stop what he's doing, because it is at variance and contrary to the laws of Ghana, and particularly the Petroleum Agreement and the Petroleum Act, which is where every other thing, derives from. Freddie Blay, Honorable Freddie Blay, makes references to things like the Companies Act and things in terms of supporting the arguments that he was making in the press release that I have seen. But nowhere in that Company Act can can that take precedence over the core legislation which governs the sector, which is the Act 919, the Petroleum Act, and specifically sections 18, 1 to 4, which deals or addresses the issues of preemption. So that's the first issue. And then quickly on the second issue, which has to do with the Aker Energy transaction and the purported buying of an FPSO for under the proposed plan of development for over $1.7 billion. And again, as civil society, we've done the homework, we've done some analysis, and it is very clear that if we want to go that route, then we're actually better off commissioning a new FPSO to be built. It takes about 2 to 3 years. The plan of development, as has been submitted, and the related matters within that clearly shows that if we elect to buy this old FPSO, so the FPSO is basically a tanker that when they produce the crude, they process it within that with the machines that are in there, and then they store the crude, and the crude is taken to the market. The current proposal is actually to use a very, very old FPSO. In fact, it's over 15 or so years old. There will be some modifications and you name to it. But the price tag of that FPSO, for us, we think it leaves a lot of questions to be. In fact, on the books of Aker Energy, the value that they attach to that FPSO was about $50 million. So how that suddenly metamorphoses and becomes 1.7 billion under the proposed, plan of development, leaves a lot to be desired. We think if you even did some modifications to this old FPSO and things like that, it shouldn't cost more than $500 million to actually do that, and then some additional OPEX. So there are serious issues that we have raised, and many a time when we have raised these issues, we've actually found ourselves being right, and unfortunately, some of the government agencies, who we assume would be acting in the interest of the nation,
Let,
not, doing
let's
what
see
is
what happens
expected
this
of them.
time, because this time it doesn't appear to me that it's actually you, the CSOs, that are raising the issue. Now it's an internal fight that you are giving, as it were, you are elevating for the people to understand. Because all the time you have raised the issues on the occasions that it has come up, you have been said to be wrong. And as we go on, time appears to vindicate you, the CSOs. Now, Mr. Boa, Freddie Blay issued a statement, and he said the allegations surrounding the supposed surreptitious, clandestine, and scandalous sale of so-called GMPC shares are unequivocally false. There is no intention by GMPC or me as its chairman to divest 7% shareholding of Jubilee Holdings Limited, nor has there been any claim by Petrosa to acquire shareholding interest in Jubilee Holdings Limited. Such claims can only stem from an uninformed and malevolent mind. On the back of the correspondence, how do you interpret this reaction?
A letter. Obviously, the board chairman has written a letter, and the letter is very clear. The response perpetual SA basically said they are ecstatic, they are excited about it, that the chairman agrees with them that we giving out 50% of our stake is mutually beneficial to us. And we should be concerned that this is a letter that is not coming from them. It is a letter in response to a letter that the chairman of GMPC has written. But more importantly, this letter was written against the backdrop of a letter that the minister has written earlier, saying that to stop engagement with Petro SA. But let me make some few clarifications. I think when I started, I made it very clear. The 7% that we acquired, yes, remember that we had some issue with ExxonMobil earlier, when Cosmos tried to sell the very early years. Because we learned lessons from how unclear the issue of preemption was, where we made it very clear in Act 919. If you look at 19, it was very clear that GMPC could preempt. But as I said, because Cosmos and Adako and Talo were there before Act 919, they basically pushed back on the stability clauses, relying on the old agreements, especially those in their petroleum agreement. And that is why the negotiation had to be done for the 7%. That, there's no doubt. The fact of the matter is that if your mandate is to increase our reserves and make sure we have more oil, and you know that we are stuck with 3 producing fields, the 4th field we have been played with the connivance of this government. With the connivance, and I say that clearly because if you go back to our record, everything that Ake brought, we stood up and spoke out and told the government it is not in the interest of Ghana. The government refused. I mean, how on earth can you tell the regulator of a country that you won't have access to regulate Ake alone in this agreement? Because Ake said they want so. They don't want anybody to come and meddle for them. How do you allow a petroleum company to decide the kind of shares they want.
All right.
All of that has happened. So
Explain.
what I'm saying is that the points that Honorable Blake has raised is neither here nor there. I've asked critical questions. He is not an executive chairman, but he is writing as if he's the CEO of GMPC. He is offering 50%. He has not shown us the legal and commercial basis for that offer. I have made the point that the joint operating agreement, even if it operates, Petro SA has 4%, Jubilee Oil Holding have 7%, and you have to do pro rata. It doesn't give them 50%, so there's no basis. So if you look at all of the things I've said, the man is on the wrong path, and that is why I have asked for a critical investigation to make sure that we keep that 7% without divesting anything to petrol.
Right, and I need you guys to help us understand this properly. And Dr. Theo Champon referred to the particular provision and read it. Is it that this preemption right, it is only Ghana that is clothed with the power to trigger it, and not any other party in the arrangement? Now, a preemption right simply explaining to say that we are in some contract together, but once there's a new sort of property or something that comes into it, I should be giving the right first. I should be offered the right first to decide whether I want to take it or I don't want, before you consider giving it to other people. Are you saying it is by the law, it is only Ghana or GMPC that can trigger that, and the other parties cannot?
It says, and the law is section 19. It says that where a contractor enters into an agreement to dispose of an interest of that contract, that contractor, directly or indirectly, the corporation, which is GMPC, have a preemptive right, interest on the same terms as agreed to preempt it. So basically, in this law of Ghana, we are saying that anybody who decides to sell his shares, our national oil company will have the first right to basically preempt it. We've made it very clear. It wasn't very clear in PND's law, but it's very clear in this law.
Yeah, just a second. And Dr. Theo Champon, what do you say is the purpose of this particular provision?
Yeah,
and
so I think
and is it being defeated in the current arrangement?
So Honorable tried to explain that, and very right. So we have to trace the genesis, go back to PNDC law 83, and even the law that sets up GMPC law 84.
Right.
Right. Normally, when a company comes in and wants to explore your petroleum resources, they will enter into an agreement with the host nation, which owns the resources under the sea. And in Ghana, in our constitution, I think 2368 or something like that, it says that all natural resources are vested, right, for the president to be used on behalf of the people. I'm just paraphrasing.
You're right.
And then it then says that the president then has offloaded part of this state interest. So this interest, or what GMPC does, belongs to the people of Ghana. They are only operating or holding it in trust for us. So if a company comes in and says that I want to explore your petroleum resources, they will enter into an agreement with the nation state, but with GMPC acting on behalf of the nation of Ghana. Or if there is a national oil company in another country, then it will be their national oil company. And then it says that if you now decide at some point that I want to transfer my equity or shares in that arrangement to another company, and in this case, whether you want to do a direct share transfer or indirect share transfer, because it is governed by a petroleum agreement, that deal that you, or paperwork that determines the contractual obligations between the nation state, and all of the partners or the contractors on the project. So if you want to do that, then the nation state, in this case Ghana, being represented by GNPC, the National Oil Company, has a first right of refusal to say that, well, I know you want to sell it to somebody else, but let me make you an offer first, and let us negotiate on that. If I decide that I don't want it as a nation state, then I will give you my blessing to go and sell it to any other party for whatsoever.
Right.
The reason and the logic behind that, Samson, is that we want the nation state to get as much of the proceeds or the shares arising
My
out of
question is, and we'll talk to Freddie Blaze shortly. My question is, has this been breached?
So there are two things here. If you read the letter and the spirit of Act 919, it is very clear that GNPC has the preemption right, and we cannot, as a people, offload those shares to Petro SA or any other company for that matter. We've paid for it. It should be a settled matter. Then, if you go back or trace back under the stabilization provisions to the contract or the petroleum agreement that governs this, and the parties then will start and say, oh, we've got a stabilization clause, you cannot change the terms, etc. Even under the old law, if you read it very carefully, because we have paid for this and it is a settled deal, again, even under the old law, we cannot offload a portion or part of this to another entity in the way and manner that is currently being proposed. So on the basis of the old law, on the basis of the new law, both of them, it is very clear. We cannot offload or sell.
Thank you. And earlier, Theo Champon was referring to Article 257, Clause 6. It says that every mineral in its natural state in, under, or upon any land in Ghana, river, stream, water courses throughout Ghana, the exclusive economic zone, and any area covered by the territorial sea or continental shelf is the property of the Republic of Ghana and shall be vested in the President on behalf of and in trust for the people of Ghana. Many times the public servants appear not to appreciate the on behalf of and in trust for the people. Freddie Blaze is the chairman of the GNPC's board. He joins us. Thank you very much for making time to join us, sir.
Thank you very much, Lardy. Where I am, a lot of noise at a funeral a little far away, and I can barely hear what the discussion is going on. But it's very important. Just as I tried to get in touch with you last night, so that if I couldn't even join, someone else could also speak on some of the issues that a number of speakers have already made their contribution on. Now, I wanted you to ask me any question. I think I've heard them. A lot of people have even referred to some laws. Of course, not all the laws are relevant. But what are the issues? Am I supposed to talk about ACE issue, or I'm talking about there's a some percent transfer that people are talking about without maybe reference to the details of it? If you want to ask me questions, I will brief you where I'm coming from. Then I will leave you and your participants.
All right. Okay. So in your letter, as in your press release, you speak about under the heading.
My letter or
your press release.
Very good.
You speak about sale and divestment of 7% shares acquired from Jubilee Oil Holdings Limited.
JOHL, yes.
Right. And here you say that absolutely nothing wrong has been done. In fact, you say that the allegation of sale of the so-called GNPC shares are unequivocally false, and that there is no intention by GNPC or yourself to divest 7% shareholding in the Jubilee holdings.
Jubilee and Temple. Listen, what I've said is that it's not an issue of GMPC holding shares and then officers, particularly Freddie Bray as chairman, decide who deals mainly with shareholding of the corporations and so forth, deciding that I'm disposing of the shares to some other company. I think that it's been lost on those who are making contributions that it's a question of preemption. And Adako deciding to offload its participating interest with regards to certain shares. It's not only 7%, it's about 24%, but some others have taken, I don't need to go into it, it's a bit detailed. But if they decided, then 7% in this respect was capped for JOHN, which was put together by Anadako. It's a company that was registered in the Cayman Islands. It's an offshore company. Now, it was that 7% participating interest that at the moment is being handed over to GMPC. GMPC have bought for 168, as one of the participants had already told you. Now, what is the issue? The issue is, after this 7% by Anadako being put for sale or having been conveyed to Ghana, in 2021, South African company, that is, who is a participant, is a member of JO, that's the Joint Operating Agreement, had already also given notice of its preemption right under the JOA, that they are also interested in purchasing it, because among the participants, what is it? Among the contracting parties, they've agreed to the idea that any of them wants to dispose of any interest that is owed, the other members should have first preemption right. Then, based on that, it's pro rata. That's the arrangement. As to whether they are right or wrong, I think it's for lawyers to decide. I can't tell you much about it. We've had advice from our own lawyers in and outside, and we are realizing that maybe we are wrong or maybe we are right. But even then, what I'm saying is that it doesn't preempt any discussion about it, because as far back as 2021, we've been discussing among them. They have said that they want to insist on the preemption, and we have said no. Then it is some kind of correspondence that's going on between me and my supervising minister, which I'm not ready to go into at the moment, over it as to what to do and how to go and proceed. But we've not yet concluded that. However, the talking between us, that is the chairman of the South African Corporation, my counterpart in South Africa, and myself, and we've met not just one-on-one, but group to group since 2021, discussing about this their intention to preempt and our intention to keep what Anadako has given us through JOHL at the moment being held by JH. We've been talking about it, and I wrote a letter proposing that can be, instead of you taking the 7% or we taking all the 7%, can we discuss, because they wanted giving 75% of them, and I said no, let them take 50%. But I added something. I added that even this that we are talking about, between us, it's subject to the approval or otherwise of my minister. This is in the letter written, and they have the copy to everybody that is involved. So we are discussing it. It doesn't mean that we dispose of it. I understand when people have come, CSO have come to say that they have been talking about AKE in the past. They've been talking about ENI in the past. They've been talking, I agree. But we are still discussing this matter. And proposals in and out are being given. They themselves counter proposal are also making. Now, in the course of this, and then letter comes out to the public, then they are saying that Freddie Bray, as an individual, had disposed of the interest of Ghana and sold out interest of Ghana. I think it's not fair.
Yeah, the contention is that GNPC has engaged Petro SA, and you have proposed an equal share. You don't have the locus to do that. You disagree?
Samson, so wait, don't talk about locus in this one. Samson, what I'm saying is this. Why should I even make that proposal? If the threat that they say that they have a right to it, and if we don't say they have a right, the question is, it goes to arbitration. I'm saying let's prevent arbitration, because I have my advice, you have your advice. But I don't want to tell you what advice I have had from our own professionals, not individuals talking on
that's fine. But
wait, let me finish. So it is a question of trying to prevent going to an arbitration. As we have a duty, fiduciary duty to our corporation, to protect the shares of the corporation, to protect Ghana's interests. And in good conscience, if you say that, please, let's talk about this one. And I'm saying, I add also that subject to the approval of my supervising minister, what wrong have I done?
yes,
People are now making it look like as if.
Yes, as you have eloquently said, you are under the minister, and the minister issues directives. You must comply by those directives. As we understand, you sought the Attorney General's advice, and the Attorney General confirmed the minister's position. So why were you still going ahead in the manner you did?
Lardy, I don't want to discuss what has gone on between me and my minister over here, because, of course, there is that you mentioned as has been amply explained and re-echoed on your platform, that all minerals and resources that comes from the bowels of the earth, the bowels of our country, are vested in the president. And therefore, we all must listen to what the presidency will say about it. So we are discussing. I don't want to now to discuss as to what our business was wrongly or rightly as well. We are discussing. So I wish I would not discuss it.
Okay, but the CSOs, like any other Ghanaian, have a right to be concerned, because, as you said, the president is holding this in trust for the people of Ghana. So, as a fiduciary,
I understand if they should be concerned. I don't find anything wrong with their being concerned. I don't find anything wrong with their, but they must also have the facts. They must also a lot of them have quoted extensively laws related to the petroleum agreement.
That's right.
And they've talked about it. They've not mentioned, I haven't heard anybody say that among the contractor parties, they also have joint operating agreement. Nobody has talked about it. Maybe they have not read it or they don't know about it. But I wouldn't say I know the law, all the law, with regards to what we are doing.
Okay.
We therefore depend on advice from lawyers and from professionals that we've hired and paid for that advice. Yeah. So I understand if they are making contributions, but they must also take time to sometimes listen or even contact and have the side of the other side, of the other people that they are accusing. That's all I'm saying.
Right, but is it not problematic when your release says the so-called sale of the shares are unequivocally false, and that there is no intention to do so or to divest 7% shareholding of the Jubilee holding, when in the letter it is rather very categorical that the proposal is for unequal sharing?
Samson, we are going forth and back. I have said that I haven't denied that I wrote the release. I'm saying the issue is preemption. The issue is not the sale of Ghana's assets.
preemption of assets that Anadaco is giving out. We say we have a right of preemption. We have the first right. And indeed, we've even gone ahead to acquire that one.
Okay.
South Africa says that they have right of preemption, maybe ahead of, because maybe Ghana, GMPC is not party to the joint operating agreement. Therefore, may not have the right. These are interpretation of what it is here and there. And this is what we are discussing. Those who are not privy to it, they don't know it, will go ahead and refer to part of the law and make it look like it's the whole of the law. Please,
okay.
That's what I'm saying. I have not discussion with my counterparts in South Africa about what can we do, because you say you have a preemption. We think we don't have it, and therefore let's discuss it. But we don't need to go to court. We don't need to go to arbitration on that. So please, if we can come to an agreement, and mind you, it's not just out of my head that I'm just saying. Please, let's decide to share what we are quarreling about.
Okay. We understand your present circumstance. We understand your present circumstance and where you are. My final question to you will be, what will you do on the back of the minister's clear objection to the approach you have taken? You say in your release that as a compromise solution, we have proposed the option of a 50-50 split of the 7% shares GNPC was holding. It is important to note that we have yet to outline specifics for the finality on the matter, and this compromise is subject to confirmation and subsequent advice of the minister. We are still in the stage of ongoing discussions. The minister appreciates what you have communicated in your letters, and yet writes in the strong language that he does. He says, cease and desist. What are you going to do?
Samson, as I talk to you now, I have ceased and I'm desisting. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay. So let me get your quick reaction so that we wrap up on this. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but let's get. Let me start with Mr. Emmanuel Kofi-Boah.
Senior colleague from Melembele was saying that his whole basis for what he did was relying on the joint operating agreement. There was one fundamental point I made. Even if we rely on the joint operating agreement, that joint operating agreement has a clear formula for sharing, and it's pro rata. And I've said Petro SA has 4%, Jubilee Oil Holding has 7%. How did he arrive at 50-50%? I mean, how did he arrive at 50-50 when he doesn't have a board approval? Is he able to tell us the legal and commercial basis on how he arrived at 50-50? Obviously not. But as I said, my real concern has to be the point that has been made earlier. The National Oil Company, led by its board chairman, who is supposed to drive us to increase our reserve, is the one leading the efforts to reduce our reserve. And we as Ghanaians must be concerned. Among a lot of the things that has happened with connivance of this government, that we in the NDC opposition have been very disappointed about.
When you talk about without board approval and so on, as we know, the Jubilee Oil Holdings Limited, which is registered as a company in the Cayman Islands, the directors are Freddie Blay and the Opoku Ashene Dankwa, the GMPC boss. Is that not so?
Okay. That Jubilee Oil Holding must have somebody who is leading it. It is definitely not Freddie Blay. In any event, it is the CEO of GMPC. If somebody has to write, should be the one writing the letter. because we all know that the board chairman is not an executive chairman. So those are questions that are legitimate there. In any event, the chairman says he was writing a letter, hopefully to negotiate, to make sure that Petroese doesn't go on the path of arbitration. But that letter was not an invitation to negotiate. It was a letter proposing a 50%, a 50-50 share. And that is the point that has to be made. But the fact of the matter is that this must be stopped. I think going forward, GMPC must be focusing its efforts in building its capacity to get to the point, that's all we've said, to get to the point where we have the technical capacity to increase our reserve and not the opposite.
Okay, thank you very much. So now he says that at this moment he has ceased and he has desisted in accordance with the directives of the minister, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh. So are you okay now? All right, Dr. Tia Champo.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much. I mean, I listened to Honorable Lee very carefully. And again, there are a lot of inconsistencies, even in the questions that you asked him, right? He makes reference to the GOA, and then he also makes reference to the petroleum agreement. But there's one fundamental point that we have to make here, that the rights that accrue under a GOA, a joint operating agreement, cannot in any way supersede the rights that accrue to a nation state, which it has under the preemption governing the petroleum agreement. It is very clear, and there's a lot of precedent to this, lot of cases that you can cite to back that up. So I'm just a bit surprised that suddenly we're trying to hide under this cloak of a joint operating agreement to say, oh, let's sit down and negotiate something. I think if Petro SA pushed, let's go for arbitration, and Ghana has a very strong case, both on the basis of law and basis of precedent and practice.
The board chairman appears to say that is what he's been trying to prevent.
But in this case, it's a non-starter, because if you look at all of the case law, the precedent and everything in here, there is no way that a party within that joint operating agreement, in this case, Petro SA, can activate certain rights in which there are other bigger rights to it. The right of the state, in this case, the preemption right of the state. And as Honorable Boa was even telling you here, even if we agree that the GO rights, even hold, and you did a prorating and all of that, there is no way you can get to 50-50%. It doesn't even arise in the first instance. So for the chair to even have proposed that and then be writing letters back and forth, I think it was a non-starter. And I support the call of civil society for the chair to resign or for him to be fired. It's very clear.
He says he has ceased and he has desisted. Is that not enough?
It is not enough. It is not enough. We've seen these things far too often where, look, certain interests tend to be driving the affairs rather than the broader interest of things. And on this particular issue here, if I were him, if I were the board chairman, I would resign on this, because...
Well, he's been clear. He says he would rather be sacked.
The state would be mortgaged and such things. If a Petro SA wants, let's push it, let's go to arbitration, and Ghana has a very, very strong case to actually fight for that 7%. We shouldn't even be entertaining that thought at all.
He says he would rather be sacked.
Well, I mean, the appointing authority can fire him. That's up to them. But on the basis of what is very clear precedent, his law, things backing it, it just beggars belief that we would even be discussing this.
But why is the focus on the board chair and not equally the Mr. Opoku Anyenini Dankwa, the boss of the GMPC? Because as you guys have pointed out, the board chair is signing letters when he's supposed to be doing all of these things. So why is it not an equal targeting?
With most of us on the CSO angle, we already said that the CEO must also resign or be fired by the appointing authority, because this is like, you're looking at this, working at a problem staring right at you, and you're literally walking with your head inside to give something away to a party that, on the other hand, rather we should be fighting and safeguarding the interests of the state. We've been talking for the last 6 years. Not a single drop of additional barrel of oil has been, added, despite all of the big talk and all the back and forth. And part of it has to do with some of these very bad and incoherent decisions that our policymakers, and in this instance, GMPC, is making.
By the estimation of these 29 CSOs, of course, there's one CSO, Send Ghana, which says that it actually did not, as it were, sign onto the statement and dissociate itself from it. Now, by your estimation, what is the monetary loss to Ghana if this were carried through?
I haven't worked out the numbers, but according to the PIAC report, last year, Jubilee Offshore Holdings and our lifting entitlements was just to the tune of about $290 million or so. I can double check the numbers just to be sure. But if on that basis you're going to be potentially giving away half of that, that's what, almost about $45 million. That can build a lot of CHIPS compound, schools, hospitals, and even roads.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Champong. And Dr. Theo Champong will stay with us as we look at what is going to come under review in the light of the IMF package. I realized that Mr. Amal Kofi-Boa was still on the line. You can speak to us in a minute. What is it that you want to say more?
Let me thank your audience, but obviously the chairman's responses were not very satisfactory, as has been stated. But you see, we cannot look at the chairman and this recent act to Petroesi as an isolated case. We must look at it in the context of the things that has happened in the upstream petroleum sector since this government came to power. And all you can describe is that when it comes to the petroleum sector, this government has basically kowtowed to big corporate entities and has basically not representing the interest of the people of Ghana. In every decision they've made, and I cite how we lost 350 million in oil in place in one day when we gave 24% of a local asset to Ake. And this pattern and this attempt at giving this 50% is as part of it. The reason why every serious upstream investor has left Ghana, the reason why the upstream sector has come to a stop still, the reason why we are stuck with 3 producing fields and is depleting and we don't see our way clear with even the next production is because this government has been a monumental failure when it comes to the petroleum sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'm on Talo's page, and it says that, I'm just reading some previous stuff. It says, as per the Deep Water Tunnel Joint Operating Agreement, that's the JOA, Talo has preemption rights in respect of the 11.05% participating interest within the offshore DWT block acquired by Cosmos Energy as a result of its acquisition of an Adako WCTP company announced on 13th October 2021. Talo has exercised its right of preemption over this participating interest in DWT, and assuming all JV partners also fully exercise their preemption rights, this would increase Talo's share in the block by 7.7% to a total of 54.8%. This would in turn increase Talo's equity interest in the Jubilee and 10 fields to 38.9% and 54.8% respectively. And I'm just on their page reading this publication of 11th of November 2021, where Tallow Oil PLC announced that it has exercised its right of preemption related to the sale of Occidental Petroleum's interest in the Jubilee and 10 field in Ghana to Cosmos Energy. Thank you. Make of it what you may. Yes, John.
Yes, I have been following the discussion and just want to also make a comment to disprove what Honorable Amakofibu just stated before he left, that there's a monumental failure on the part of government. He has been a minister in the sector before. Ghana didn't have 7% in any of the interests of the big players in the sector. How will he describe that? Today we are talking about government policy that has created a certain interest for Ghana that is under discussion. So he should not be talking about failure. If there's any monumental failure, it was him when he was in charge. I mean, clearly, what has become an issue today is a matter of different policy direction by the same government. He's even talking as if it is not the minister who has made this issue public. It is the minister himself. And then, of course, his position has been supported by the CSOs. So we must not create...
I don't think the minister made it public.
Well,
I think it's the CSOs that made it public.
Yes,
that's what we know for now.
But pushing the position of the minister.
That's right.
So we must not make it look like government is not even aware about what is happening. It is government, I mean, in terms of different positions, led one by the board and the CEO, and another by the minister, which has become controversial. So I don't want Honorable Kofi Buah to take the position that he has taken. If there's any monumental failure in that sector, it is rather the NDC government. I just want to put finality on this matter by agreeing with what Chairman just stated before he left. He said, I have seized, I have desisted. So what is there to talk about again? He himself acknowledged that even in his press release, whatever he was doing was subject to the confirmation and advice of the minister. So he knew the limitations of his own authority. He couldn't have done...
He was being prompted, and it appeared that he was ignoring.
Yes, but he says that he himself acknowledged in his latest publication that whatever he was doing was subject to what the minister's confirmation would be. And the minister was clear. Cease and desist. And today, unfortunately, we didn't have that in his publication, but he has announced it to you that he has ceased, he has desisted. And fortunately, this matter has become public. It's also before His Excellency the President. I totally believe that the right decisions will come. His Excellency will give the right instructions, and all these matters will be laid to good rest.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. John Ampontia-Kuma. We will take a break here and return to look at the package of flagship programs that the government intends to review, the word that it loved so much some time ago. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. The Ghana Revenue Authority wants us to let you know about exemptions from payment of property rates. The Ghana Revenue Authority, GRA, in collaboration with the Ministry of Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development, and the Metropolitan Municipal and District Assemblies, has commenced the collection and payment of property rate in the country via myassembly.gov.gh. Note, myassembly.gov.gh. Assembly is ASSEMBLY.gov.gh. So myassembly.gov.gh. The Local Governance Act 2016 mandates all persons and corporate bodies who own immovable properties to pay property rates to the MMDAs without any exception. However, the Act exempts some categories of properties from the payment of property rates. These are premises appropriated exclusively for the purpose of public worship and registered with the District Assembly, cemeteries and burial grounds registered by the District Assembly, charitable or public educational institutions registered with the District Assembly, premises used as public hospitals and clinics, and premises owned by diplomatic missions approved by the minister responsible for foreign affairs. The GRA wishes to state that property rate is not, note, is not the same as basic rates. Section 234 of the Act defines basic rate as an amount imposed by the District Assembly payable by a person of or above the age of 18 years and below the age of 70 years who resides within a district. Basic rate is imposed on persons whilst property rate is imposed on properties. Additionally, basic rate is a fixed annual rate, whereas property rate is based on the value of the property as determined by the Land Valuation Division of the Lands Commission. The GRA entreats the general public to note that no person, irrespective of age, is exempted from paying property rate unless approved by the District Assembly. GRA has dispatched client support officers to assist property rate payers, register and pay their rates. Pay your property rate for developments in your assembly. You may call 0302 756 820, 0549 986 968, or 020-429-5387 for further information. The numbers again are 0302-756-820 or 0549986-968 or 020-429-5387 for further information. And when I started announcing this, I realized that yes,
finally,
yes, I remember how there's been a debate about it, and how people have said it had delayed
too much, and you see, it shows the patriotism of the Ghanaian.
And the rates that we have been paying are woefully not realistic at all.
And even currently, with current system, it's still not adequate because the current or the existing laws only talk about the building. It doesn't factor the land, the sites or the situation.
Okay.
Of the land. But it's a good start.
Right.
I know with time we can amend and achieve the real value.
And to be able to do it from the comfort of your home.
Exactly. I mean,
myassembly.gov.gh.
Do you have a message?
Yes,
already?
yes, we have received them.
Well, so it shows they are working.
Right. So the explanation here is important because when we received them, we were thinking something double was going on.
Okay.
We didn't understand.
Okay.
But this, information has clarified. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. Now, a couple of messages. Then we go to the IMF matters and flagship programs. Fee Ado says, but in the very first place, why would he be the board chairman for such a place like GMPC if they don't have a motive of creating, looting, and sharing? What is his qualification in that field? I don't get your point, really. Yini Tidi says, is Freddie Blade not tired? I really wonder. He should let such things go. Beatrice Apio-Ofori says, I love the fact that he is ceasing and desisting now. Emmanuel Aqua says, so per the explanation, Honorable Freddie Blay is putting out, does it mean the order to release the shares is coming from the presidency?
No, he didn't say.
Okay, Amma McGold says, what at all is Freddie Blay saying? The fact that you and your legal team say it's legally viable doesn't mean it's in our best interest as a country. Listen to his condescending tone. And finally, Opoku Nana Somwa says, on a more serious note, it seems Freddie Blay is working for his own interest. What is the authority of the board chair of GMPC over Minister for Energy? The president must force Freddie Blay to resign. Kofi Siko says, Freddie Blay should just stop talking. What he ought to do was, what he sought to do was in error, and he must admit it. Thanks for your messages. Now, let's look at the matter of the IMF and the review of the flagship programs. Joining us to help us with that discussion, of course, Dr. John Ampontia-Kuma is already here. Dr. Theo Champong is also with us. Kwame Pianim, economist, joins us. Dr. Clement Abasa Park will also joins us now, and later he will be replaced by Seth Emmanuel Tekpe, former Minister for Finance. But let's begin with senior citizen Kwame Pianim, the economist. Thank you so very much for your time once again, sir. This was something...
That's my uncle, waiting for me.
Okay. This was something that was inevitable. In fact, many had suggested that these things ought to be done before this time. So, not too late, is it?
Thank you very much for giving me a voice on this issue. I think that we'll be missing the point if we don't take the IMF program. The documentation is very clear. The IMF program is just first aid. Like you are unwell, you get first aid, you go, the doctor, you tell the doctor the truth about your illness, and then the doctor gives you a diagnosis and says, go and do these things. And then you go and do that. Okay? We've been going to the IMF several times, almost every 4 years since our independence. This is the time, as Ghanaians, all of us, to sit down and say, what have we been doing wrong? One of the things I learned as chairman of UB, Federal Bank for Africa, a Nigerian bank, which is becoming a global bank, is this. Once a mistake is made, and there's a law, there's a serious review of the processes, the practices, what went wrong, where it happened, how it happened, and then an honest way, clear way of doing it, so that we know exactly what went wrong, and then we try to amend the procedures, the practices, and then those who went wrong, incentives are in place. You are not promoted, you are dismissed. If it was not just incompetence, but there was also corruption involved. And the time has come for us Ghanaians to sit down and say, how do we put our resource management together in such a way that we do not repeat this? They say it's only a mad person who keeps doing the same thing and think that will get different results.
Right.
We have to change it. What went wrong? If you read the IMF documentation, for the first time, he's saying we are in a deep crisis. The government should come up honestly and give us all the facts. How serious is this crisis? They say it is deep. And for the first time, IMF admits this our crisis predated COVID. It predated Ukraine-Russian war. I'm sure that if you go out of the studio and talk to 10 Ghanaians, most of them did not eat bread for breakfast. It was corn-based products with fish. If we are pursuing planting for food and growth seriously, as we do with projects where people benefit, the Russia-Ukraine war will not affect us. You know, COVID, we got money from COVID. What did we use it for? So let us define, let's put our cards on the table. How did we go? My interest is that the World Bank and the IMF, no, they are very clear. They did not look through the documentation properly. They did not talk about tax spending. They talk about risk pricing all the way. Look, I'm old enough. When I was in the Ministry of Finance in 1970, petroleum products were contributing significantly to tax revenue. Now we are subsidizing them. We are subsidizing businesses for bringing cars, for young people to be driving four-wheel drives in town, where four-wheel drives are not needed. And we subsidize the fuel. They say money. Money is not the issue. Everybody says money, money, money. They say if you have an engineer with a hammer, as is only true for your advisor, all your problems become nails to be knocked. It's not revenue. Most of you, before we became adults, did we have oil in Ghana? We didn't. Oil revenue are coming in. I would say money, money, money. The time has come, there's no for a quick man. How do we cut our costs according to our clause? And also, I'm happy that you started your program announcing for a property levy. This is a country of laws. Go and read the act. People over 70 do not pay property tax. If you want them to pay, say, irrespective of age, go and amend it so that we go by the tax. We've been building this country from the top to the bottom. Nana Akufo-Addo said, let's get district judges elected so that they will do the job from the bottom. They are the implementing agencies. Any development plan you do, the district are supposed to do it. If we build roads and give it to the district to maintain, if water and sanitation is a district activity, will the district allow guarantee to go on? They will not allow it because they drink from the water. So let us, and I talk to a lot of my friends, university professors, and they say, no, we don't want partisan politics to go to the district. What are we saying? Are we being logical? If we don't trust Ghanaians to be democratic, democracy is messy. It's not clean. Everybody has a voice. We, the elite, think we can think for the people. We can't think for the people.
Right.
So if we do not want district assembly visitors to be elected, how we go to election? So we should get political parties down at the district so that we know who is corrupt and who is not corrupt.
Right.
This can be somebody else. So let us start now and think, how can we remove the mistakes? The Public Finance Management Act is very clear. If we were going by it, there will be no problem with this excessive reckless borrowing that took place. Parliament was there approving that. Let's make sure that we make laws that will make Parliament not do that. Otherwise, we don't pay them their extra. If you are president and you take us to the IMF, which means the economy is not doing well, you are the chief executive of this place. We don't pay you entitled your retirement benefit. And as Russia, you earn it once. If you're a parliamentarian, you take it, don't come to Parliament again. You reimburse before you come. So all these loopholes, we have to sit down and do it. The band-aid is the IMF borrowing. It's 3 billion, we have to pay it back.
Okay.
So what do we do to make sure that we don't end up in the IMF again?
Right. That's actually been your major concern over the period, how you've been unhappy about the fact that we are getting back to be recolonized, among other things. But very, very good ideas. A good friend of mine, Bernard Avle, recently gave a speech and a presentation and said, when a political party wins power, its best must be made DCEs. We don't really want to start from that point. It doesn't appear there is incentive to be working as a DCE. But you seem to be talking about a review that is quite holistic and not limited to the flagship programs. That is what is at stake now. How do you propose this should be done?
Look, the thing is that we have to cut our expenditure. It's not limited to flagship projects. A whole lot of things. The cutting, there are two ways of looking at it. One is symbolic, to show the international community, those who are going to help us, that we are serious about tackling our problem. So if you say, people say that, cutting the number of ministers we have will not help any man, because how much are they taking? It's symbolic. It shows that we are serious. And you know that running this small country with more ministers than the UK, US run doesn't make sense. And every minister that you have has about 2 cars. It doesn't make sense with a country of 30 million, 16 regions, when we're 10. It means the districts that are supposed to run, implement policies, are not viable enough. How many people are in a district? You cannot hire a good accountant. You cannot hire a good lawyer to help you. And that's why Ghana Revenue Authority is overburdened collecting their other taxes that they cannot collect. They're being asked to collect for the district assemblies the property rate. It doesn't make sense. Let's go back and make sure that the size of districts are economically viable. They can hire an accountant. They can hire a lawyer to help them with their tax and collect their taxes and so forth. We cannot continue the way we've been doing them. If you have a district, immediately you create a district. There's a district health officer, district education officer, all out to the expenditure. So it's not just the flagship that we are talking about. Flagship hospitals, 111 hospitals. As everybody asks, where are we training the doctors and the technologists? Yes, we specialists demand these hospitals. If we haven't been able to build the Lardy polyclinic, how can we build 111? So let's be realistic. We always go on circles, and then the party communicators will come. Let's tell the party communicators the debts that are going to be paid. Your grandchildren, your children are going to be paying them. So be serious. Don't talk about issues you do not know. And let the people who are in government answer the question. They say we should cut our expenditures to fix our revenue. Everybody says it's more revenue. The more taxes you levy on Ghanaians and the private sector, you weaken them. Every tax is like a shock. And you want the economy to grow so that your revenue grows, your GDP grows, and then your revenue is coming in to support your expenditure. First and foremost, your public service has to be lean and mean. You have to finance your public service. You have to finance your security services. You have to finance education, a reasonable, realistic education, so that your human capital is there. The resources that we have in the land, the oil, the lithium that we seem to want to give away, the gold, the monkeys were working on it millions of years before human beings came. It didn't help them because they didn't have the brain to use them. That's why you educate your people so that they have the brain to use them. And we have the people. In the 21st century, there is no field of human endeavor where you don't have Ghanaians excel. And I keep saying it. The two people who are in the American Hall of Fame, engineers, they are two Ghanaians, Mr. Lawrence and Osasa. Kojo Osasa. These are Ghanaians. We have the people. Nkrumah didn't have the people. Look at what we are seeing. Now we have the people, we have the resources. Let's put our minds together. We want to grow steadily and make progress. And if you are a member of the NDP, we say development in freedom. We do not compromise the liberty and freedom of individuals for development. We will rather forego development so that our people are free. That if you don't believe in that, don't come to the NDP. Join another party.
You are talking about values here, and values that get into tension, liberty, equality, community, efficiency, and all of that. But people have asked questions. Those who are joining your party at this time, do they come with any philosophy? Do they really appreciate the philosophies? They don't. So that may be a difficult ask. But I wanted to ask you about this. Since you mentioned education, it does appear that even though the free SHS policy may be a candidate for review as one of government flagship, programs, the government is very adamant in wanting to listen to views and research that says that it should be targeted. It doesn't look like that one the government is willing to do, as in target the free SHS rather than the wholesale manner in which it is doing it. Between 2017 2021, over 5 billion has gone into that project. Is this still sustainable in quality if it is not targeted?
Look, priorities. Human capital is what drives most countries anywhere. Look at India. Human capital, they are now all over the world in the IT field. They are making money. Money that are going to India for apps that we all use are bigger than our cocoa revenue. If we had supported the app that Bryce was trying to bring, where all drugs, you can phone in and find whether it's probably or not, we would have been getting, in terms of people paying even 1 cent or something for using it, it would have been billions. That is priority. As far as I'm concerned, if you believe in the development of human capital, and you believe that the probability of an Einstein coming from Kwame Anyenini's family than an Einstein coming from, say, my brother's family, you don't know the probability. So let's give everybody a chance. All of us, you, myself, we are privileged now because we had the opportunity to go to school. Let's give that opportunity to everybody. But it means you don't do that and you want to build a cathedral. It doesn't make sense. Cut a cathedral. Build it. When we started, I think we started it. This should be an NDP program, saying that we are specialists, so we want to cater to the poor. It's an excellent project. Children cannot go to school, they are not well fed, feed them. In India, they litigated the consumer, they say, I'm poor. I cannot buy uniform for my child. So, what is free education to my child's country? They say the government should buy school uniforms for them. So, once you take that, that is priority, number one. Put your money there. And then health, the national health insurance. You see, this is also priority. Let's put money there. And then stop the others that are not necessarily priority. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. You cannot say, I'm not going to cut education. Fine, don't let us cut it. Let's feed the children. Let's make sure that the money is paid. You go to a lot of these places, they say, we haven't had breakfast for a long time. Why? They don't have flour. They haven't been. Flour has not been given to them. If the district assemblies were working well, they will source the food from the district. If it's furniture, furnishing a school room, the carpenter, the local carpenter will be given the money to make the chairs instead of importing them from abroad and then in rubber and sticking them there. That's how you develop. So put that aside. Education, we are all for education. Let's make sure that the children are properly educated. The quality of the education is good. Teachers are well trained. Then let's spend the money there. And then the money is not there for building a cathedral. The money is not there for buying V8 for people. The money is not there for ministers to be traveling first class when they can go economy. The money is not there for we to be hiring executive jets when we can go commercial. You know, these are things that we have to take a look at. What are priorities?
All right.
Education to me is important. Without education, look at the people in your studio. Look at their family background. What would they have been? Education is the greatest transformer. It gives all of us an opportunity. And the society benefits because we then contribute to the development of our citizens. The education program, I won't touch. Anything else, I will touch. The number of ministers, let's cut them now to show people that we are serious. As Russia, let's review it. Once in a while we do it, you know. If you want to become president and you haven't been able to buy a house and you want to become president of this country, you do not qualify because you have nothing to protect. We should not be buying houses or building houses for president. Okay? And if we are doing it, we should do it the proper way. Go and build whatever I want to build in the hometown of that president. So that we choose development.
All right.
So that we all don't stay in Accra.
All right. As always, thank you so very much, Mr. Kwame Pianin, for your insightful, value-laden, presentation that will guide many. Thank you so very much.
That's
that's from your constituency.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Special greetings to Uncle Kwame Pianin.
Right. But he's been talking a lot. You don't seem to be listening to him.
I listen to him a lot. We speak privately more.
Okay. All right.
I listen to him.
So as you listen to him,
Yes.
he's even going beyond these flagship programs
Yes.
that are up for review. We don't even know what the nature of the review is. As far as he's concerned, he won't touch the education, benefits.
Yes.
Right. But he wants it to even be over, reaching. It should go far.
Yes.
To questions of ex gratia, questions of the size of government and government spending, and so on. Now tell us, what is the nature of this review that government is now talking about?
Thank you. And let me also commend Uncle Kwame Pianin. Today he spoke in defense of the values of the party that we all belong to, freedom, development in freedom, and emphasize on the need for the human capital development to be key. And that is why free education and all the flagship that we speak about is central and very critical for the future prosperity and growth of our country. And I'm on all fours with him. And I also agreed with him when he talked about President Akufo-Addo's position on election at the district level, because if you don't reduce the units of growth and development to the basic level and you centralize all at the center, you don't achieve the impact the way it's supposed to be. So eventually, I think we should bring back that discussion and look at how we better decentralize political and development growth of the country to the district level. I agree with him entirely on that.
To the district level.
To the district level.
When he mentioned that, it got me referring to Bernard Avle, who says, when you win party, your best hands
Yes.
should be going to the district.
Yes, that means that we have to...
You all look up to the president to appoint you to be ministers rather than to serve at the district level.
But have you questioned why it is so? The reason is incentive. So if you can direct incentive to the district level, you get the best talent there. So once it will come with a policy. Once we agree to look at that direction, if you direct incentives, everybody will go there. So I believe that is the key issue.
Okay. So let's get to the flagship.
Now the flagship, yes, but I'll get to the flagship discussion. I just want to give a brief on this IMF thing, and briefly, then we'll get to the flagship, because we went to the IMF with a program, and His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo's cabinet approved the PCPEG program, which was the basis or the foundation for the IMF program, which was approved. The PCPEG is the post-COVID, PC, post-COVID, COVID-19 program for economic growth. So basically, that is what it's about when we say PCPEC. And that was the program which served as the foundation for why we achieved the staff level agreement and the board approval. And basically, what is it about? It is, let me say, it's a large and front-loaded fiscal consolidation program, which means that, of course, to ensure we achieve sustainable growth and bring back the economy onto sustainable path, whilst also ensuring that we protect the vulnerable in society. So if you look at the disbursement, we are now going to have 600 million every first 6 months, another 600 million 6 months. Before the rest is spread, 360 million for the rest of the period within the 3 years. So it's front-loaded. And within the PCPEC, we need to achieve certain thresholds or certain objectives. One of the key objectives is restoring public debt sustainability. So, and I'm sure the discussion about this flagship will be anchored on sustaining public debt sustainability. You see, one of the key problems we have had as an economy, especially when the IMF talked about pre-existing fiscal and debt vulnerability, not just even Ukraine and COVID-19, was the fact that if you looked at the component or the composition of our revenues into our debt repayment, it was becoming unsustainable, or it was unsustainable. And you see, every country's debt position became unsustainable because it was exacerbated by COVID-19. Today, as we speak, you know there's a huge deadlock in America over whether to extend the debt ceiling of the country, because the $35 trillion ceiling of the country is reached. And unless the Congress of America extends the ceiling to maybe 40 or 45 trillion, American government cannot borrow. And so by 3rd June, which is some few days away, if American Congress is not able to settle that debate, America will run into default of its debt. Why have they gotten there? In the last few years from 2020 when COVID struck, America has printed over $15 trillion to shore up the economy. And it's not only America. Ghana went through the same situation. We had revenue shortfalls in COVID and did extra expenditures unbudgeted for, and we had to resort to extra borrowings in order to sustain the economy. It's not only Ghana or America's situation. Every economy in the world went through that phase, and that is where we are. And that is what led us to where we are.
I don't want to engage you. I don't want to engage you on that debate where you shift the entire blame to COVID and Russia, Ukraine, and you conveniently forget your role as a government, how competently or otherwise you manage the economy and got us to where we are.
You know, in my discussion, I use the word pre-existing, agreeing with IMF that beyond COVID and the Ukraine war, they were pre-existing, but they said what? Fiscal and debt vulnerability. If you are vulnerable, you can still be okay. And many nations were okay. But when the external shocks came, we didn't have buffers. Okay, so we are not saying that we didn't have issues, but it got exacerbated by the COVID and the external shocks. That's the point we have been making. So what I'm saying is that in order to overcome all these difficulties, we have gone with this PCPEC to also not just receive money, but to do structural reforms. Okay, we intend to have reforms, tax policy reforms, revenue administration changes, like we just announced about the property rate going digital, and of course the public financial management system.
Earlier you had those 3 taxes that Kwame Pianin said the president should not assent, and he went ahead to assent. Meanwhile, you say you listen to him.
Well, but of course you don't expect us to agree with everything he said.
I hear you.
We agree on a number of things. And of course, you see, I would rather, so we'll go into the expenditure issues and see whether the discussions on the flagship is just sentimental rather than dealing with the main issues. In this PCPEC, we also want to focus on certain structural deficiencies in the economy. For instance, the cocoa sector. The amount of expenditure inefficiencies in the cocoa sector have to be addressed. the energy sector, the IPP commitments and regular payments you need to do to sustain the electricity to be on, some efficiencies have to be improved. You are talking about ECG and its recovery problems. You are talking about Volta, Gridco, and all the rest. If we are able to address those inefficiencies in the expenditure side, you realize that even the debate about the flagship programs becomes even moot. Okay.
But you didn't have to wait for the IMF to stand over your shoulders with cane like a teacher before you do this.
But you see, this is where we always disagree. On your own website, My Joy Online, if you go to March 23rd, it was published that government itself announced to review the flagship programs. March 23rd, March 20.
I have all the date lines here.
Yeah, okay, so you have it.
I'm going to deal with you
so
at a certain point.
Yes, I want to get a specific date.
And when you were rejecting even proposals by others in that regard, and yet you were
proposals.
You were at various times making your own.
21st March 2022 on My Joy Online.
Right.
All government flagships to be reviewed. This is after we went for this 3-day cabinet retreat at Eduasi. So government itself have been doing this self-assessment. And don't forget that the PCPEC program that was submitted to the IMF for the program was submitted by government of Ghana. It is our program which was accepted by the fund. So it is not the IMF holding any cane on government. It's just sentimental. But you see, now let's go into the discussions of why we should review expenditures and why I'm saying, and why the point I'm making about these flagship programs being sentimental discussions.
Okay, so why I was also, you get the why I was also waiting until we get here before I point you to these deadlines.
Okay, sure.
Is that if you in fact were doing these reviews as far back as then, why are we still at it?
Okay.
Where are we?
Yeah, we are at it because they are not the major problems. And I want to point you to the major problems.
Okay.
Good. So the total expenditure of Ghana, I mean, if you look at the appropriation budget for 2023, we are talking about 190 billion Ghana cedis. Okay. In that component, 56 billion of it is going into debt repayment. 56 billion. In that appropriation, about 45 billion is going into compensation and wages. Okay. And then you are talking about 35 billion in statutory payment obligations, common fund, get fund, and all the statutory requirements. Goods and services is just about 16 billion. Now, the flagship program that many people have focused on is the free SHS. The budget in 2023 for free SHS was 2.9 billion Ghana cedis. So if you are going to spend nearly 200 billion in Ghana, okay, and you are spending 2.8 billion of it to educate 1.3 million of the population, what is big deal about it? This is the reason why you don't get attention. Where the elephant in the room is your debt obligations, which is what we have taken steps under the IMF to do domestic debt restructuring. We are doing external debt restructuring to bring these obligations within sustainable levels.
From 2019 to date, when this debate has been ongoing, cumulatively, free SHS has consumed 11.34 billion. That's the budget allocation for this flagship.
And what is your cumulative expenditure in that period? Before you go on.
Planting for food and jobs has taken 2.49 billion. One district, one factory, 823.3 million. School feeding program, 3 billion. Livelihood empowerment against poverty, 1.16 billion. And water and sanitation initiative, 354.5 million.
Yes, these are insignificant compared to your total expenditures over the 5 years. So I'm saying compare. Your problem is not these flagship programs. The elephant in the room are the 3 top expenditure items.
Compensation,
which are rigid. Compensation,
debt
obligations, and your statutory payments.
Okay.
This is where, as a nation, you must look at. And then even the SOEs. There's huge contingent liabilities on government from the SOEs on the part of cocoa bills. You are talking about the energy sector. We just discussed the energy sector. If you are able to address these contingent liabilities and the big ticket items, you don't need to worry your head about 2 billion.
The SOEs, the state enterprises, they've been making losses.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. Yes. So you need to look at your public administration of the SOEs. And now, as part of the IMF program, all SOEs must operate on the GIFMES. So you need to bring expenditure rationalization and efficiency in the public administration of these SOEs. You have to now pay attention to the energy sector bills. How do you reduce it? How do you ensure efficiency and recovery, especially with the ECG? And let me commend my good brother, Lawyer Dubik Mahama, for the good job he's doing at the ECG and all that, and the other thing. This is where government must look at. When we are talking about reforms and efficiency, it's not the 2 billion educating 1.3 million Ghanaians, like Mr. Kwampieni said. We must even add on to that. But our focus must be, how do we reduce the waste in public expenditure?
The question of targeting that came up with the free SHS is something that even the finance minister initially was for. That there are people who can afford. Why don't you identify those who can't and make savings for something else?
Can I use myself?
Or make savings to improve the same system?
Let me use my history. I met you in Legon. But before Legon, I was born in Sankore. My parents, both my mother and my father, they are alive. They are cocoa farmers. My father was also a purchasing clerk in Sankore, in a village in Sankore. When I went to Opokuare, I never got access to cocoa scholarship. My friends from Accra, contractors' children, came with cocoa scholarship in Opokuare. So I always say that if the moment you say the poor must not pay and the rich must pay, in Ghana, it will be the rich children who know the ministers and the education directors who will enjoy it.
You just ensure you have an efficient system.
Where is that efficiency coming from? Why didn't you ensure it when I was in the village? So I am a typical example of how a poor farmer or a poor boy in Sankore village can rise to become a minister if access to education is provided. Then President Akufo-Addo said, whether you are a rich child or poor child, looking at the budget and the sacrifice and the benefits, let's allow every child, whether he's from poor home or rich home, education is a leveler of social mobility.
But if that does not allow you to produce quality,
but
are you really giving them
evidence
education?
Has shown that we are, in fact, in the last WASI report, Ghana topped the whole West Africa in terms of quality of performance. So what are we talking about evidence here? This is not the issue. I am saying that the cost, the discussion, the sentimental discussion on flagship program is neither here nor there, because those are not the issues. If we really want to deal with the issues of expenditure rationalization, forget about flagship programs. How much are they? Look at the years, even you combined 5 years, combined the total expenditure of Ghana in that 5 years, you are running into trillions. How much is tens of billions to ensure that you are making social impact on your people? Okay. So that is not the point. So the elephant in the room, like I said, and that is what the IMF program is seeking to address, weaknesses in our public administration, in SOEs, the cocoa sectors, several contingent liabilities in the energy sector. If we are able to address those problems, ex-gratia, look, arguments about ex-gratia, another sentimental matter. You get it? Because even yesterday, if you listen to the Chief Justice, she says that the judiciary doesn't receive ex-gratia because it is what they are entitled.
I'm sure normally people's attention is actually not on the judiciary.
Okay,
and
it's
those
rather
who have
on the
gone
politicians.
Away, it's the politicians who try to equalize.
Yes, but
who try to get support and sympathy when the matter comes up, and then they say even the judiciary, is also receiving.
But Leonard, you know it is one article that is providing this incentive to everybody. And it is a matter of working back what you are entitled to. Why do we call it? Maybe we just have to change the name. Because even the Bible says that the laborer is worth his wages. So let's be fair about some of these discussions. And I refer to it because of its percentage vis-a-vis your total expenditures. It's in what? Millions, maybe hundreds of millions, not billions of cedis compared to the billions that you are spending. So those are not the issues why we are struggling as a nation. Let's deal with the issues that will resolve our problems.
You mentioned compensation.
Yes,
That is part of compensation.
So let's deal with
if you want to deal with compensation.
So what's the component of that in the compensation budget? The last year was 250 million Ghana cedis. The entire compensation budget is 45 billion we are talking about. So I am not saying it's not important discussion, but I'm saying that let's deal with the ghost names, let's deal with the things that drag and are repetitive, the inefficiencies that create waste is where we must all focus so that we bring down the burden. If you latch on to sentimental issues, you are always going to go back to the problem.
Okay, hold on there. You're still here on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. Earlier, you heard Kwame Pianim, economist of great repute. He mentioned the year when he was at the Ministry of Finance, and myself and John, we turned and looked at each other. 1970. Where were we? All right. Now, let me go and bring on, I think I'll start with Dr. Apak on the question of the education free SHS policy, because John has given us, something to think about. And Kwame Pianim also supports the point that that is not something that you should be looking at, touching at all. Dr. Apak, you and your party have been advocating the need to look at this. Of course, there have been other independent researchers who have also said there's a need to target. What do you say?
Samson, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Very well. Let me say good morning to you and my fellow panelists. And of course, to greet the people of Bulsa South. Samson, it is important to put on record that when the NDC and our flag bearer, John Dramani Mahama, as well as other astute personalities in the educational sector, called for a review of the free senior school policy, that call is not to suggest that we are arguing with the quantum of resources that the state is putting into the program to ensure that we derive the needed outcomes. Our call for review has always been predicated on what we consider to be implementation challenges. And so, yes, I would agree with both Kwame Pianim and my good friend, Dr. John Kuma, that if you were to look at the expenditure as far as the free senior school is concerned, and you were right, in the last 7 years, what government has proposed, for which Parliament has given approval, is just slightly above 11 billion. Clearly, that cannot be a huge amount that I believe has contributed to our current woes or our current economic challenges. But let me be quick to add that I find it rather interesting that John Kuma has made a very forceful argument in defense of the cost of implementing the policy. But what I want to avert his mind to is this. Many members of his own party have sought to argue that one of the reasons why we are where we are, one of the reasons why government or public expenditure has ballooned is because of government investment in policies, including the free senior school policy. So I am happy that today we all agree that investment in providing free education to our wards of secondary school going age is not and cannot be said to have contributed to our current predicament. Now, Samson, I have taken the time to look at the IMF report, and in particular, the portions that have to do with education. I've also taken the time to look at what government itself said in terms of social spending and what it is expecting to do. Now, when the IMF speaks about the flagship program or policy, the free senior school policy, and acknowledges the fact that it has led to an increase in enrollment, but with poor learning outcomes. I think that is very, very significant. It is largely because of that component of poor learning outcomes that justifies the call by John Mama, the likes of Professor Ite, Professor Demensa, you know, the likes of Kofi Asare of Education Watch, and Dr. Pate of Institute of Educational Studies. Are we getting value for money? And the answer is no. The answer is no, because we ought to get an educated population at the secondary level, which is well prepared to take up places in tertiary institutions. Right? Look, you can call a few of my colleagues who are still at the universities and lecturers and ask them the quality of students who are coming through these days. They will tell you that the quality is unsatisfactory. I know for a fact that there are agitations from colleagues who are still in academia proposing the need to institute an entrance examination, because we have students who write WASI, get very good grades, and yet when they get to the universities and other tertiary institutions, they are struggling to cope with tertiary level educational activity.
And that is attributable to free SHS?
Hello?
That is attributable to free SHS? Is it free SHS that is to blame for the quality or lack of it that you talk about?
Well, clearly, the senior high school is the feeder level that feeds into tertiary. So when you have lecturers at the tertiary level complaining about the quality of students that they have to deal with, then we must go back to look at the source of the students who go on to take positions in the tertiary level. And look, when John Kuma speaks about WASI and the fact that we are the best, what he's failing to add is that since 2020, the WASI that Ghanaian students have written is exclusive to Ghana. In the wake of COVID-19, there was a situation that emerged, which then caused WAIC to try and customize its program to suit the conditions of different member nation states. So since then, the Ghanaian variant of WASI has only been written by Ghanaians. So what I'm saying is that we have no legitimate basis to compare. But be as it may, the point we want to make is this. The free senior school policy is a good policy, but we believe that it still continues to be bedeviled with implementation challenges. And that is the reason for the call for a review. Let's take another look at it. Let's identify the areas where the program is doing well. We know for a fact that when it comes to issues of feeding, there is a challenge there. We know for a fact that we are still grappling with inadequate academic and residential spaces. We know for a fact that contrary to government's pledge to cover the cost of ICT and library as part of the mosaic of free, since 2017, when the program started, not even one cedi has been remitted by government to cover ICT and library fees.
Consequently,
so what I'm saying is that
consequently, your kind of review will rather increase the budget for free SHS. Is that it?
No, our kind of review would bring efficiency, it will make the program sustainable, and it will give us value for money. For example, there's no reason why we should maintain a centralized food distributory system where we sit in Accra and give fat contracts to, by and large, persons affiliated to a political party who sometimes undersupply the quantities of various food items that they ought to be supplying. Why can't we devolve it, decentralize it, to allow for the schools to engage their own suppliers to supply them the food, for example. Why can't we bring on board the private schools to fully participate in the delivery of the program? Why do we still have to continue to sideline the parent-teacher associations when we know that traditionally they have contributed in no mean measure to ensure that our secondary schools operate to the maximum efficiency possible? So all these are ideas that we believe when we sit around the table, we can have a conversation and to look at the best way forward. Our argument is to say that the amount invested is too much. We are calling for efficiency, and we believe that all of this that we are speaking about, if we were to do them, would bring about an improvement in the program in a way that will be commensurate.
Thank you very much.
With the resources that we are putting into the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clement Apak. Dr. Clement Apak is MP for Bulsa South and Deputy Ranking Member, Education Committee of Parliament. So we'll move on from the education aspect. John Kuma has made it rather clear where the government stands on this and appear to affirm the position that Kwame Pieni expressed, that education or free SHS is not what you should touch, because actually that helps to bring some equilibrium, some equality in the system, and you don't have to target it. Well, there are the other programs, the One Village, One Dam, the One District, One Warehouse, Infrastructure for Poverty project, and so on. He looks at the quantum that the national cake, the national cake, and says that's really not the elephant in the room. You're talking about compensation, you are talking about statutory allocations, and you're talking about debt servicing. And this is what takes the chunk of our money, and that's where to look at instead. So Setepe will join him to take that other part for the opposition's view. Now, Dr. Theo Champong, economist and political risk analyst, is still with us on Zoom. Doc, from Kwame Pieni to John Kuma, more particularly looking at the economy holistically and what needs to be done, even though they will not admit that now it is the IMF that is forcing them to approach things in the manner they are doing. What do you say, listening to them so far?
Yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done. Last week, I think on your platform, I did indicate that I'm not too sure the extent of the commitment to actually doing what needs to be done. And I predicated this on the fact that in the last IMF program we exited in 2019, we signed that program around a similar time in April of 2015. And we had 1.5 years going into the election to have made some substantial progress on those reform areas. But 1.5 years down the line, we didn't meet many of the benchmarks to the extent that when the new government came, they had to renegotiate and extend the timeline for that program. We've signed a new one in May of this year. And if history is anything to go by, against the prospect of a big election around the corner, I remain a bit doubtful of whether or not those serious commitments that the government has said it wants to would be done. Again, I say this because if you look at the program, and Honorable John Kuma is right in saying that it's anchored on the PC peg, but within the program, the government itself says that they're going to commit and meet, most of the fiscal adjustments that they've got to make, about 5% of that between now and 2026, but almost 2/3 of that is got to be done between last year and this year. We're almost at the halfway point. Maybe Honorable can tell us specifically what have they done on some of the expenditure rationalization, the cuts, all the statements that have been made prior to that should then give us cause to actually believe that going forward, these things would be done. And I say this because, again, let me quote Honorable's own statement. We were here when he made a remark on the floor of Parliament that we are not going to go to the IMF today or tomorrow. Was that not the case? And we ended up, going there, particularly because there were some challenges. So I think, look, what needs to be done as a country, we all know what must be done, right? On raising revenue or on the expenditure side of things. But the commitment to actually doing what must be done, and importantly, sustaining it beyond an IMF program, is where really the challenge lies. So
you don't think that at this juncture we clearly don't have a choice? It doesn't matter how reckless politicians can be. This time they don't have a choice but to stick to this program faithfully, because, yeah.
2019 program, we also didn't have a choice. But in the first 1.5 years, we still didn't meet the program benchmarks. You can go back to other programs that we've had with the fund, right? So even under an IMF program, there can and there have been slippages going into election years. And that's the thing that I want us to be aware of. So the question then becomes, what can we do as citizens, as civil society, as whoever, to ensure that this time around, the government actually commits and implement those things that they said they've got to be doing. And, they're saying that in the account language that what quadriplasi obema ontoma bisanidi, right? So in this sense, the government has actually said in the last budget and in the one before that, they have started doing some of these programs anyway. And we said that it is, quote and unquote, an IMF supported program. So it is the government saying that we're going to be doing these things. We're halfway point in the year. Let us see the evidence of what actually the commitment has been since those things were said right back then.
That's
so
a
we've passed some
question.
revenue measures. But importantly, on the expenditure side, let us see what has been done, because that's the only way people would actually start to believe that going forward, these commitments would be met. And I get a little bit worried, because if you look at the numbers and the size of the gap that needs to be filled in terms of our financing, etc., a huge chunk, 70% of that, needs to come from the relief that we're going to get from the external debt restructuring. We haven't even started that conversation yet. But you also get the posturing that, we possibly are even thinking about going to the market to borrow. And I'm asking myself, who are you going to borrow from? The very people that you owe, you are thinking, and you haven't even sat down to discuss terms of your, restructuring or haircut or etc. So there are a lot of policy deep issues within. The structure of the spending, Honorable talks about some of them, the big ticket items, debt servicing, compensation, etc. But every little is much and every little adds up. So you're having the education conversation. And if you pay close attention to the numbers, and I'll wrap up in a moment, that in terms of education spending, right, we should be spending between 4 to 6% of our GDP on education every year. In the last few years, we've been doing just around 4.5%. But in the years before, from 2010, if you look at the data up to about 2016, we're actually doing an average of about 5.5 percentage points. So in real terms, education spending is actually come down, right? Although as a proportion of a GDP, you still see that. And the biggest issue with the education sector in terms of spending, again, is primary education. Dr. Park and others who probably have been engaged in this sector would tell you, and they'll show you the numbers. So we're spending far more on free SHS than we're even spending in other critical sectors of the economy. So in the IMF document, they say, look, focus your attention and any savings that you make on, for example, primary school education. Because if the fish is going to rot, it starts from the head, not when they have gotten to senior high school that were trying to correct those imbalances. So yes, the big ticket items matter, but the smaller things in terms of the inefficient spending and the wastage and things in the energy sector, we have not even gotten there. Our state-owned enterprises, all of these things must be done. What has to be done, I repeat, we know what to do. I can show you, we can go back to IMF programs and even budget statements from 1993. And you see the same issues persistently repeating themselves year after year. So you begin to wonder where the problem really is. The problem is not the IMF, the problem is us.
The problem is not the IMF, the problem is us. Sounds like a profound statement I read this week, either in some philosopher's work. All right. We'll take a break at this point, but remember that this show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, the university I love, where there is the honor code. People are taking examination without invigilation, and they don't cheat. That's the kind of country you want. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on the MTN to join. Duroplast, how you get your water matters. Remember, where Duroplast goes, water flows. DBS Industries, roofing, Papa Fie. And I take the break on the note of this message from Imani. You know, they have been big on this education matter from the very start of the free SHS. And Kofi Bento says, on free SHS, we, Imani, have always said the implementation will lead to a waste of the money and reduction in quality. And so we should do the hard work to target and manage properly and make sense of the expenditure. This is because education is too important to just throw money at and leave. John Kuma suggests that because it is not the most expensive project, we should not bother wasting the money. We disagree. So far, we have spent about $1 billion since free SHS started. That's too much money to waste. The saddest part is not the money, it is the poor output. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Godwin Agbeko says, when Nana Addo said, pass the WASI to prove that the free SHS has improved in quality, I knew they will equate quality to results. That's where we are. That's what we are witnessing. J. Spa says this government has never accepted any responsibility before. Kofi Amwa says, had it not been for corruption, mismanagement, and incompetence, what is $3 billion for 3 years to Ghana? And did John know all these elephants in the room before he said government won't go to the IMF? Akofo Kwame says, an education policy that pitches the sector as offering refuge for persons who couldn't access their principal career path choices isn't suitable for developing at scale talent that would drive broad socioeconomic development. Review education policy. Colin Stetter says the critical question to ask will be whether or not we are looking to solve an interim problem with the IMF bailout or a long-lasting problem. Well, you saw how Kwame Pianin took the issue. Yes, John.
Yes, Sam. Let me commend the Honorable Apak today. I mean, he spoke as an educationist, agreed principally that their focus on review of the program is not about the expenditures, which I also will agree.
That's correct.
If we all have to enhance its efficiency, why not? So let's share ideas on that front. Dr. Theo Champon, I agree partly to what he said, that the program has front-loaded fiscal adjustment of 5.1%, but He didn't add that it's over a period of 3 years. But what it means is that we must have that fiscal adjustment, about 3.1 percentage point of it in 2023, this year. And so, you know, the fiscal, the SLA, the staff level agreement was reached in December. And so even though the board approval came in May, we started implementing this IMF program in our 2023 budget. So we know that the first review will be in November, and from January, we are working to make sure that all the conditionalities that we have to make or we have to meet before we are able to be passed on to another level of the program are attained. He made a point about me saying we are not going to the IMF today or tomorrow, and let me take this opportunity to clarify that issue. Because if the same debate comes...
That was a
today,
government position anyway.
Yeah, anyway at the time, but that my position won't change today if the same agreement comes up. We were debating in Parliament on whether to pass the e-levy or go to the IMF. And for me, my philosophy about how we must build our nation, I believe that even if we shall seek external help, it must not take away our own ability to do things for ourselves. And that is why I'm a strong believer of Ghana Beyond Aid. And so in that debate in Parliament, I strongly stated that we won't go to the IMF today or tomorrow as long as there's an option to try a domestic alternative, which was the IMF, the e-levy. Unfortunately, we know what our friends did with the e-levy and how they bastardized.
But you know the e-levy would not have produced the result, the solution.
Yes, in fact, the advantage of going to the IMF is not the money, but the discipline and even the national and international confidence.
I'm saying to suggest that e-levy was a substitute for IMF will not be correct.
Well, you see, in this country, unfortunately, nobody has the political time to go that path and succeed. But if we as a nation can be bold and put down the politics and say this is the bitter path to domestic independence on our economy, let's follow it. We will achieve it.
We have very little time for
Setepe. But the time is so short, 4 years to go into an election, and nobody is prepared to go on the
We have very little
domestic
time
path.
for Setepe, and we want to ask him about how you have, very articulately, express what the problem is and where the solution should be targeted. Mr. Setepe, forgive us, but we have very little time. Compensation, debt servicing, and statutory allocations. That's the elephant in the room, and not these flagship programs that the expenditure on them put together over how many years does not give us, how much is it again? 11.5. Yes, 11. Yes. What do you say?
Well, thank you very much. When you take the budget and you are designing a policy, you ought to know that compensation, the largest element is education and health. And even when you come to, the total budget, it is not defense. It is not social intervention. It is education first and then health. So if you are going to add on to those budgets and they are exhausting, you must know that you are going to borrow. And so to say that simply because it is not impacting the budget itself, when you end up borrowing and when you end up accumulating arrears, is a misstatement of fiscal reality. I think that's a very, very important point. That's our budget already. Now, this is the reason why there was an alternative to free education. If you go to the United States, you go to the UK, secondary education is free. But it's paid. Nobody pays for, boarding. Nobody pays, certain costs. And that was our e-school approach. Even that, when we got into difficulties, we said, let us suspend it because crude oil prices and others fell. When we come on with 2 additional oil fields, which the current administration got, then we will. We take it to schools. They said, let us then look at teachers, the teachers and others, and which will fit. So there was an alternative to free education, which was cost effective. I think the important thing is cost effectiveness. But let me I know I have a very little time. Now, I have 4 tables. The first one is the priorities of the government from the IMF program identified priorities for IMF capacity development. The elements on public financial management, which includes expenditure, does not mention prioritization of flagship policy. Second table, structural conditionality under the standard credit facility, which is where we are going to be adjust and then releasing of the money. This attached to it, the deputy minister can correct me. I have gone through it, 9 items, including the prior action, excluding the prior action 5, total making 14. Not a single mention of prioritizing flagship policies. I have the risk assessment matrix, and we all know that free SHS at least is an issue. We have social, we have others, no mention. And then final table, I have the preference, the performance criteria and indicative targets. In fact, the indicative targets, which is the numbers, does not even include expenditure. It includes elements of expenditure, right? But the areas that we have are arrears and others, there is no mention. And in fact, when it comes to net change, even in other elements, 000, no mention. So if we are in a program, and these are the 4 areas where you engage the IMF, and there is no mention in this element. The only area where there is a mention, and I stand for correction, is in our memorandum of economic policy, which the Minister for Finance and the Governor signs in the letter, which is attached to the letter of intent that is signed. And it is only there in paragraph 41 that we mention that we review government flagship programs and publish a strategy to decide the future. Publish a strategy.
All right.
The Deputy Minister is telling us that they have been implementing it, and they are now saying they're going to publish a strategy, for those very things.
All right.
It's unfortunate that we don't have time, but you can see the extent to which there's a lot of rhetoric and, just as happened, with drugs. Let me add a final point.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry, but this is all time will allow us. John, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is all time will allow us.
No problem.
My outfit, as always, is by Habil Scruter. And you can call them on 0200 84 1988. They are found at the Ajiringano Gate, East Legon. My guests have been Dr. John Amponchia Kuma, Dr. Theo Champong, Kwame Pianing, and Clement Apak, as well as Seth Tepe, who joined us only briefly because we didn't have time. As always, join me tomorrow for what I love to do. I love a lot more to do. My weekly legal clinic, the Law Show, Free Press versus False News Crimes. Kofi Ebua of the GJA and Oliver Bakavomawo return for a second installment of that discussion. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. Have a good afternoon.